So welcome and thank you for joining the 11th in a series of Central Coast focused webinars informing and inspiring local clean energy development and resilience. I'm Barry Rands, Green Transportation Program Lead for San Luis Obispo Climate Coalition, and I'll be your moderator for today's meeting. This webinar is hosted by Uniting the Central Coast for Action, a program of the SLO Climate Coalition. Previous webinars examining a wide range of energy topics are available on our website, sloclimatecoalition.org. Two of our past webinars focused on electric vehicles and how to maximize the benefits to the grid through the use of vehicle-to-grid technology, also known as V2G. That's an acronym we'll probably be hearing a lot during this webinar. Today we have a very exciting program examining the potential of this technology with electric school bus fleets. You will learn how V2G technology can add multiple benefits to our electric bus fleets. During the presentations, we request that you enter your questions into the chat. Feel free to respond to chat questions if you have personal experience or expertise related to the question. Following the speaker presentations, we will address as many of those questions as we have time for. If we can't get to them all, we'll try to answer any remaining questions in writing. Before we start our program, I'd like to recognize our partner organizations shown on the screen now, which have helped us in promoting this webinar. We deeply appreciate their support. We appreciate your feedback on the webinar and other ways we can work together to develop local clean energy and resilience in our communities. And it's now my pleasure to introduce Rachel Zook. She is the Senior Program Manager of Utility Partnerships at NUVVE. In this role, she collaborates with utilities and government agencies across the United States to develop pathways for scaling vehicle-to-grid technology. Prior to joining NUVVE, she worked as a program manager at the Center for Sustainable Energy, where she focused on electric vehicle projects in New York State and Oregon. She has been in the clean transportation industry since 2017. Rachel holds a BS from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Be our second speaker, Albert Burleigh. Did I get that right, Albert?
You got it right.
Vice President for Alternative Fuels for Bluebird Corporation. Albert joined the Bluebird Corporation in May 2007 and has held various positions within the company, including Regional Sales Manager and Director of Dealer Development and Regional Executive Director. In his current position as Vice President of Alternative Fuels for Bluebird, he oversees all aspects of sales and business development for North America. Albert holds an MBA from McCombs School of Business at the University of Texas at Austin and a Bachelor of Marketing from Louisiana State University. And our third speaker will be Christina Celeste-Russo. She has been in the transportation industry since 2013 and currently serves as the Director of Transportation for Orange Unified School District. Additionally, Christina serves as the California Association of School Transportation Officials State Treasurer. Christina earned an MBA from the University of Phoenix with an emphasis in management studies and a Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration with a minor in Communications from Cal State University, Bakersfield.
All right, my name is Rachel Zook. Sorry about those technical difficulties. As Barry said, I'm a Senior Program Manager of Utility Partnerships at NUVVE. Move on to the next slide, please. So today I'm going to talk about how you can use vehicle-to-grid or V2G technology to electrify your school bus fleets, which is something that a lot of you are probably actively looking into doing. To start with, I will talk about what vehicle to grid is very generally. So V2G allows electric vehicles, including electric school buses, to serve as DERs or distributed energy resources by enabling these vehicles to both charge their batteries and then discharge energy from their batteries. It's using the same charging station that has bidirectional capabilities, and by discharging energy from the batteries, they can then support the electric grid. At NUVVE, we have software that controls this power flow in and out of the chargers to create a virtual power plant, or VPP. I'll do my best to not use acronyms throughout this, but it aggregates all of these electric vehicle batteries into this virtual power plant that can then deliver different energy services to the grid. So if you have 10 electric school buses that each have, say, 100 kilowatt hours available in those batteries, and we want to support the grid over 4 hours, with NUVVE software, we can work it out to make sure that we are dispatching energy at an even rate throughout those hours, and also make sure that you have the energy that you need to run your routes whenever you need to. Next slide, please. So what this would look like on your end is you would just plug the bus into one of your V2G enabled chargers. You would charge your battery safely in V2G mode, works like any other fast charging station. You just plug it in, and then you will leave it plugged in even when you're fully charged or whatever rate you wouldn't ordinarily stop. And you can make money by sending power back to the grid when it's needed, or you can save costs on your electricity bill by, again, discharging and having that work against your highest demand points. So those of you who are responsible for, or at least see your school district's electricity bills, probably know how incredibly high they can get. This can help you manage those demand charges. Final step is that when the drivers need to go, when they need to run their routes, they're ready. They have the full amount of charge that they need with a buffer. There's no concern about them losing during. Sorry, gotta pop up. Thank you. A little bit about NUVVE. Our global headquarters are in sunny San Diego, although we do operate around the world. We actually have operations going in 5 continents. A lot of people think of V2G as being a very new technology, like new within the last couple of years. The patent was actually developed in 1996 at the University of Delaware by Dr. Willett Kempton, who is one of the co-founders of NUVVE. He's still a senior advisor to us. So we have over 25 years of R&D behind our technology. It's new to a lot of others. It's not new to us. And while we have a lot of operations going around the world, particularly a lot in the Nordics, in the US, we have almost 250 level 2 charging stations installed and 123 V2G capable DC fast chargers installed. The vast majority of these are in California, our home state. And over the next several months, these numbers are going to become a lot bigger because we've already shipped out a lot more level 2s and DC fast chargers. They just haven't been installed yet because these things take time to work out with the utility. In California alone, we are actively working with over 100 school districts. So we're very familiar with the needs in different geographies, on how to work with the different utilities, on what funding programs are available to you. We've also helped school districts secure over $24 million in EPA Clean School Bus rebates. That's from the very first round. We'll hear about round 2 shortly. And as a lot of you probably already know, round 3 is currently out there. So if you're not looking into it, please do. We can help you. It will close in a couple of months. Next slide, please. Okay, so when you're thinking about V2G, there's a lot that you should be keeping in mind along your journey, because this isn't something that you want to decide after half of your charging stations have been installed. That said, if you've already started, it's not too late to start thinking about it, but really it's best to wrap your head around this as early as possible. So step 1 is mapping out your fleet electrification plans. Don't think about what you would like to do over the next year. Think about what you want the next 5 to 10 years to look like. How many electric school buses are you planning on acquiring? How many charging stations do you need to install to support that? Are you planning on using one garage? Are there several sites that you would be using? These are really important things to start planning as quickly as possible. After that, again, assuming that you want to do V2G, you should select the charging stations and electric school buses that you want to use. It's important to do this early because not all charging stations and not all electric school buses are V2G capable. Without getting too into the weeds, there are hardware integrations that need to be done between the charging station and the electric school bus to make sure that everything works properly. And then there has to be a software integration. We have the NUVVE software to ensure that you can actually send the energy back to the grid. If you're interested in knowing how exactly to sort through the different requirements, the standards needed for V2G certifications, just let me know. I'd be happy to send those over to you. I say that because right now in the industry, there is a lot of noise, but not everybody that says they're doing V2G is actually doing V2G. Not everybody has been doing it commercially. So if it is important to you, it's crucial that you're making sure that the charging stations and school buses you select really are ready to go with these capabilities. After this, engage your utility. It's so important to engage your utility as early as possible. Even if you're actively getting electricity through your local CCA, if you're in PG&E or SCE territory, you still qualify for the really substantial rebates that they have for electric school buses and for medium and heavy duty charging infrastructure, which is what this would fall into. So when you're talking to your utility, you want to talk about not only what you're planning on doing with your fleet, but you want to specify early on that you do want to do V2G with these charging stations and school buses. The reason that you want to do that is because when you're doing this process, you will need to go through interconnection. If any of you have solar at the school districts or at your homes, you're probably familiar with this process, but this is what you have to do with the utility to make sure that you can actually send energy back into the grid. So very important to engage the utility, be clear about your plans, clear up any questions as early on as you can. After that, you want to start looking into grants and rebates. Your utility will offer several. There also might be some through CARB or the California Energy Commission. There are the EPA Clean School Bus rebates or grants, depending on which cycle you're part of. There are different air quality district rebates. So you want to make sure that you are getting as much money as possible for this. We understand that the electrification process can be expensive. So there's a lot of money out there right now. Take as much of it as you can for your electrification goals. Once you've done this, you can start learning about the pathways for earning revenue by discharging the bus batteries. Of course, you can learn about this anytime that you want, but I think that when you want to really start digging into the details and making sure that you understand everything that needs to be done, that can happen a little bit later in the process so you don't get bogged down too early. And when I say that, I just mean understanding, when the utility might be asking you to discharge your battery, making sure that your drivers understand that the vehicle needs to stay plugged in over a holiday weekend, for example, in case the vehicle is called then. Finally, stay connected with your utility, your dealership, your V2G provider, everybody involved in this. These are relatively lengthy processes, 12 to 18 months at a minimum. So this isn't like a one and done. You're going to want to stay talking to everybody the entire time. Okay, so one of these programs that's available in California is the Emergency Load Reduction Program, or ELRP. And this pays customers to reduce energy consumption or to discharge to the grid during grid emergencies. This is something that you can already be a part of just by, reducing your consumption. Maybe your district is already enrolled in it, but you can also be part of it. There's a specific subgroup for V2G, and you can get paid $2 per kilowatt hour to discharge to the grid. So if you have a bus plugged in with 50 kilowatt hours available in the battery, that would still leave you a big buffer, and you discharge that during one of these events at $2 per kilowatt hour, that is $100 right there. And this is a check that the utility cuts. It's not a deduction from the bill. The duration of the program is May 1st through October 31st. It's managed by PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E. Someone just said $2 per kilowatt hour is a lot. It is a lot. This is a really, really good compensation. So we actively had 2 school districts participating in 2023, which is exciting because at this point in the state, they are the only 2 school districts that are participating in this specific group in ELRP. And I'm going to go ahead and talk about one of these districts that we've been working with. Next slide, please. So Cajon Valley Union School District, we've been working with for several years, and they actually are doing the first V2G program in Southern California. We did a partnership with them and SDG&E, our big utility down here, to install 6 bidirectional charging stations and see what they're capable of doing. You'll see that El Cajon, where Cajon Valley USD is pretty inland. So they tend to be driving longer routes than schools in, San Diego City would be. So they do need, a lot of energy left in the batteries. They can't solely focus on discharging to the grid during events. Next slide, please. So in addition to the 6 chargers that they originally installed, they really liked how things were going. So they added 8 more, and then they decided to add 3 more. So right now we have, I can do math, 17 of these chargers. Yes, 17 of these chargers installed. Sorry, can you go back one slide? Thank you. Okay. Of these chargers installed at 3 different sites within this school district. And aside from the ability to obviously charge their buses and then monetize the V2G capabilities by selling energy to the utility when it's needed, they also love this current setup because it is good for the electric school bus batteries to be in use during the summer instead of just sitting idle for, 3 months. This is something that comes up a lot, questions about battery health. By charging and discharging the battery, are we avoiding the battery warranty? Are we destroying the battery? We do have a battery health paper on our website. Obviously research is still being done on it, but it's clear that it's not extremely harmful to the battery. There's maybe like a 1 to 2% we found a decrease compared to if it was charging only. And we work with all of the OEM or electric school bus manufacturers to make sure that the warranty stays valid even with discharging. Next slide, please. So we did not only this season, but the previous season, 2022, ELRP at Cajon Valley USD. And over the events called, we discharged 767 kilowatt hours, reduced 228 kilograms in carbon dioxide equivalent, and the number of homes served, and we kind of do this calculation to help give people a better idea. It's the equivalent of 452 homes being powered during this time. Next slide, please. All right, so that is it from me. If you have any questions about V2G specifically, I'm happy to answer them. If you want me to do some, back of the napkin calculations for you, probably not on this call, but shoot me an email and I'm happy to do that.
Okay, thank you, Rachel. And I think we'll hold our questions till the end, and we'll go right ahead with Albert's presentation.
Thank you, Barry. Hello, everyone. I'm Albert Burleigh, VP of Alternative Fuels for Bluebird. I'll tell you a little bit more about EV school buses in general, a little bit about V2G as we're active with that as well. But if you go ahead and flip to the first slide. I think most folks know this, so I'm not going to go over it in detail, but there are several benefits to EV school buses, many of which have really helped EV school buses grow over the last 5 or 6 years in volume. One, the first one, of course, is zero emissions, which is very, very beneficial to the the kids that ride the buses and also the communities where they're operating. That's the real reason they exist in the first place, which is just phenomenal. The other one is reduced maintenance costs, and I think I have a slide here in a bit to talk a little bit about this, but the great thing about EV school buses is they are pretty simple animals compared to their diesel counterparts. Diesel buses have a very sophisticated and complex after treatment system for their emissions to keep them clean enough by EPA and Corp standards, but EVs have much fewer components that require really little to almost no maintenance, which is a nice benefit because it can be very expensive to maintain diesel school buses. So there's a savings over time with these products. Quiet operation, there is such a thing as noise pollution. If you've been standing next to a diesel school bus, you'd know what I mean. These operate in a lot of communities, and it's fantastic that they operate quietly. Also helps with children on the bus, as well as a lot of school districts operating these report better behavior on the buses because the kids aren't shouting over the noise of the loud diesel engine. They could talk at a more normal tone, and because of that, their behaviors tends to be better, which is a nice benefit we didn't think about initially, but certainly our customers really benefit from that. Grant funds, Rachel talked about this a little bit. Really, probably one of the biggest reasons for the growth is there has been significant grant funds available on EV school buses. The large one that many know about is the EPA Clean School Bus Program. That's in the second year right now, that offers a total of $5 billion over 5 years for electric school buses and associated charging infrastructure. That has really spurred a lot of interest from school districts as they can get a electric school bus at little to no cost in some cases. Performance is also outstanding. People don't realize it's kind of like a big golf cart, right? You get an electric golf cart, you hit the gas, and it's all low end torque. It kind of snaps your head back. Maybe not quite the same in electric school bus, but I always like to quote this. If you got into a typical diesel bus and you hit the gas, you're going to get to 60 miles an hour, about 45 seconds, which seems like a day and a half, but it'll get you there. On an EV bus, it does it in less than half that time, about 22 seconds. So we certainly don't want drivers to do that. It will burn a lot of energy if you drive it that way. But if you have to get up on the highway quickly, you can do it better in this product than anything else. And then vehicle-to-grid technology. Certainly, we were one of the first on the school bus side to implement vehicle-to-grid. Every school bus we build in our Fort Valley, Georgia plant comes standard with vehicle-to-grid technology. And NUVVE is our partner in that. They develop the software to operate with our school bus so we can discharge energy when the proper charger is purchased to work with our product. Next slide. We do offer school bus products in all 3 bus types available in the school bus market. The one to the left is with a joint venture we have with our sister company up in Quebec called Microbird, and they build a Type A product. It's on a Ford chassis, has an 88 kilowatt hour battery, can go about 100 miles on a single charge. The 2 products to the right is the Bluebird products that we build in our Fort Valley, Georgia plant. They both come with a 155 kilowatt hour battery. Will get you about 100 miles or better, depending on conditions and driver behavior and what have you. We actually have a school district in California, in the Bay Area, that's getting over 130 miles per charge with that battery because they've trained their drivers how to drive it properly, and they spend a lot of time trying to understand how to extend range when they drive it the correct way. And we also just started offering a extended range battery, which is a 196 kilowatt hour battery that in most conditions will get 130 miles or better. Those just started to hit the market, so we haven't done all the testing, but we think they'll at least do 130 miles and likely much better. So next slide. A little bit about the growth in EV school bus sales, and this is just on the Bluebird side. Obviously, there are other OEMs who build these products as well, but everything you see on green in this map of the US and Canada is where we've deployed EV school buses. So now we're covering 41 states and 4 Canadian provinces with these products, and we now have over 1,500 EV school buses in operation as of a few months ago when we celebrated that milestone. So certainly not in pilot phase anymore. These are mainstream products running through 400 or 500 school districts across the US and Canada. and operating very, very well, and really all conditions, because you can see we have them in very warm conditions like Southern California, Arizona, but we also have them up in places like Minnesota and Quebec, where it gets very cold, and they operate really great in those conditions also. Next slide. This is just a snapshot, a little bit of our system on one of our products. You can see it's there's just a few components that require this bus to operate, starting with the energy storage system, which are the batteries. We put them between the front and rear axle, between the frame rails, really in the safest place with a safety cage. So in an event of an accident, they're properly protected. We have a large motor made by Dana Corporation that's direct coupled to the rear drive axle. That's why you get that really good acceleration. We don't use a transmission. It's not necessary on electric products. And what that allows is, less moving parts, less maintenance, less cost, and really better performance. And you can see a host of other components, one being the thermal management system. And that's why these buses operate really well in all conditions. They have a chiller on there, so if your batteries get too warm in very hot conditions, it'll cool them down. Or in very cold conditions, when it gets sub-zero temperature, we actually have 3 electric heaters, and they heat the cabin for the for the students, but also heat the batteries, so they can kind of maintain that optimal temperature that batteries like to be in, which is around 70 to 80 degrees, and therefore they can really operate in any kind of weather condition across any market. Next slide. I did mention this earlier, but our partner in the EV side is Cummins. They actually have a division called Accelera that provides all the EV components for our bus. They kit it up and send it to us, and we install it on our buses in our factory in Georgia. And the nice thing about Cummins is they also are our partners on the service side. So they're located, of course, all across the US and Canada. So if there are issues with the buses and they need service support, Cummins can provide that support on the electric products, as well as our Bluebird dealers. We're also in the process of being trained to actually work on these products also. So very good coverage. In case anything goes wrong, we have support out in the market. Next slide. And we've been doing this since about 2018 when we deployed our first buses, and it was actually in Southern California where the first buses went into operation. But since then, we've made over 170 product improvements on our EV products in that time frame. So things are evolving relatively quickly, and that's really to improve efficiency, improve reliability, and just overall try to build a better product to meet the needs of school districts. So that's a great thing about being in the market early, one of the first, is that we've learned a lot over time. And the buses we're putting out today are much better really than the buses we deployed back in 2018. So really happy with the progress we've made. And like I mentioned, Cummins has been a great partner on the engineering side. Next slide. I talked a little earlier about the maintenance and what's required on an EV school bus powertrain. If I were to show you the same slide for diesel, it would be 3 or 4 slides in probably very small font. But on EV, it's much different. Really, for example, you have a drive motor, and there's no maintenance on that drive motor over the life of the vehicle. The only thing we require is that once a year, the technicians just torque the hardware that hold it to the frame, and that's all you have to do. There's no other maintenance required. We also have a thermal management system, which I mentioned. There is coolant in that system that runs through the batteries and runs through the body heaters for the cabin. That coolant has to be replaced every 5 years, but that really is the only major, if you even consider that a major maintenance requirement on the powertrain. And then you also have the electric power steering in the battery system. Again, it's checking fluids in the power steering and the battery system. Those 155 kilowatt hour batteries or 196 require no maintenance. It's the same thing. All they have to do once a year is torque the hardware that holds it to the frame of the bus. And that's all that's required. So you can see why maintenance costs are very minimal on these electric school buses. Next slide. Charging, depending on the product, we have our base battery, our standard battery, and then our extended range battery. On our base battery, you can charge it with either a level 2 charger or a DC fast charger. It has a CCS1 connector, so depending on what charging solution you prefer or what your needs are, the school district, you can use either level 2 or level 3. On our larger, you get larger, level 2 makes less sense. It takes longer with that charging solution to charge it. We've made it only available with DC fast charging so that school districts can still charge that product in about 3 hours. We're trying to keep our products at a maximum charge. If you need like a quick charge in the middle of the day, you can do it in 3 hours or less if it's completely empty. So a lot of flexibility there in the charging solutions that are available to school districts. Next slide. Also, on the V2G side, I mentioned this earlier. When we launched our product about a year later, we started making it standard with V2G capability. And we were able to do that because we worked with NUVVE to develop the software to work with our product. And currently they are our partner in a V2G solution. So if anyone's interested in that, we do have customers throughout the US. I think we have 7 or 8 different applications now of customers testing V2G and discharging energy. And they range from California to Indiana. We have some in Illinois and some in Colorado testing the technology, and it's working very well. But it's with this NUVVE bidirectional 60 kilowatt V2G charger that is coupled with our bus to make that possible. Next slide. Services, we do offer really every part of the solution when someone wants to electrify the school bus fleet, starting from assessing what's the right product and the right fit for their school district. We have grant administrator and a grants manager who help find funding and actually apply on behalf of school districts. We actually were awarded about 600 buses on the first round of the EPA program, much of which we actually completed the applications for ourselves, for our customers. Infrastructure, we do help with that process as well. And they're in California. Our local Bluebird dealer is A to Z Bus Sales, and they have their own infrastructure group that can come out and do site assessments and assess really what is needed at the local level for each school district to what fits best for their application. V2G, we mentioned, our partner is NUVVE, and then deployment. We do a lot of training for school districts, for drivers, for technicians, for our local dealer partners, but also in the event that a first responder in the community wants to be trained on what to do in the event of an accident, we provide that training as well. There's no cost to that. We come out and do the training when needed. We also have some online virtual modules that anyone can go in and do training on. So if anyone's interested in that, we can get you a login and a password so you can actually look through those training modules and learn more about Bluebird electric school buses. Service and support, I mentioned, we do that through our local dealer network in Cummins. And actually, end of life, what do you do with these batteries, right? When these buses have to be taken out of service, we are working on a contract now with a national provider that will actually be able to take these batteries back and recycle them. So we don't have a need right at the moment because these buses only been in operation for about 5 years. But before too long, that is going to be a need. So we're actually starting to work on that already. Next slide. And another thing, obviously, as I mentioned, demand is starting to grow. And up to recently, we can only build 1 or 2 electric school buses a day. Back in April, we opened what we call our EV Build-Up Center that just does EV chassis. We've kind of taken it out of the kind of stall build mentality and moving it into a real production type facility. And now we can do 4 to 5 EV school buses a day and have the capacity to do up to 20 buses a day when the demand is there, or about 5,000 a year. So we're kind of ready as things continue to grow, and we're seeing that they are continuing to grow over the next several years, especially with some of the EPA requirements that are going to happen in 2027 that are going to make diesel school buses possibly a thing of the past, where these are going to become a lot more popular, and we're going to have to be ready to support that demand. So that's why we opened this center, and we've been producing buses there now for about 6 or 7 months. Next slide. That's it for me, Barry.
Well, thank you, Albert. And you did generate a few questions in the chat, and we'll get to those after our next presentation. Although, Rachel, if you want to answer some of those questions, I think you might have that information at hand. Okay, our next presenter is Christina Celeste-Russo, and she is with the what was it? The Orange Unified School District. And
Yes, hi everyone.
Welcome,
Thank you,
Christina.
Thank you. My name is Christina Celeste-Russo. I'm the Director of Transportation for Orange Unified School District. You can go to the next slide. So why electric vehicles? A lot of this information, my cohorts, Rachel and Albert, have already been able to share, but as you all are aware, you know, electric school buses are zero emissions and they provide a much cleaner environment. To their point earlier too, from a school district perspective, as the director here, we've noticed our community members really are loving these electric school buses. We currently have 15 type D transit style school buses with 2 more on order. So soon to be 17 with the potential to get another 14 type D buses here in the future. So we've had several instances where our community members, parents, school sites, we've had situations where community members would literally call us and say, can you please reroute your bus and not have your bus drive down our street? And these buses have avoided those complaints for us moving forward because they are so quiet. Half the time you don't even realize that they're on. So they are definitely providing a cleaner environment for our students and for our community members and our school sites. I know Albert did talk about the reduction of fuel and maintenance cost, which is definitely true and something we've been able to experience here as well. We are averaging about 22 cents per mile for our electric buses versus about $1.50 per mile on our diesel fleet that we were previously spending. So it is quite significant. These buses, our first set of buses came in about 3 years ago. So they are still in the warranty phase. And so we haven't had much maintenance cost associated to this fleet at this time. You know, some basic things here and there, but for the most part, they're covered under warranty, and anything that needs to be, you know, handled with the buses are handled through the vendor in which we bought it from, which in California here is A to Z Bus Sales, because we do have all Bluebird vehicles. Our state is moving towards different emission standards and requiring us to go green. So we're definitely taking advantage of all the different incentives and the grant funding that is available to us. Our first 7 buses came through the Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Fund. Other set of buses came through the South Coast Air Quality Management District and with HVIP funding stacked together. And then our last round of buses came directly through HVIP funding. So you definitely want to know what funding is out there. We did apply for EPA funding and unfortunately didn't get selected through that process, which I know Rachel said is we're currently in like the 3rd phase of funding with EPA. We have not been selected. That's more of a prioritization criteria that they're functioning off of, and providing funding primarily to rural districts at this time is what we've noticed. But if the funding is out there, and you have the resources to use to apply for that funding, might as well take advantage of it, because you never know when that opportunity will present itself to you or your district. I'm currently getting LCFS credits. Our charging infrastructure at this time is level 2 AC charging stations, and we are moving forward with 2nd phase of infrastructure right now to incorporate some level 3 DC fast chargers. So my experience with V2G is not really relevant at this time, but hopefully in the future. Next slide, thank you. So obviously the application process, even as Albert said, there's lots of resources out there, and for most of our grant funding, we've been able to utilize A to Z Bus Sales, the vendor here in California, to assist us along that process with applying. So there's some steps you always want to make sure that you are, looking at before going into that application process to make sure that you have all your bases covered. So you want to definitely select the best bus and grant out there for you. Usually you provide different grant funding depending on the size or type of bus that you're looking to get. So what is it that you're trying to replace in your fleet? You want to collaborate with your vendor to help you complete that application. Not saying you can't do it on your own, but it's definitely pretty helpful to be able to work with the experts in that field who can provide that support. And with infrastructure, you want to think in advance. So get your quote and start working on your design plans to obtain your infrastructure. A lot of the grants also provide funding towards your infrastructure as well if you choose to go that direction. In my case, we actually worked directly with the utility, and we got our infrastructure handled through SoCal Edison and their charge ready transport program. So once your grant, sorry, back to the other slide, please. Yeah, thanks. So once your grant is awarded, you obviously have to deal with contract execution, get your order placed, and then make sure that you're starting your infrastructure process well in advance. So that way it's handled and completed by the time, or hopefully by the time your buses are delivered. Next slide. All right, so for infrastructure, here, like I mentioned, we do have NUVVE. This is a picture of our stations here at our yard. So you can get your infrastructure at either no cost or low cost. And the reason I say that is because every funding program is different. Ours, I would say, was considered low cost because we did still have to purchase, obviously, the charging stations. We had to pay for the installation of the charging stations, and we had to contract with a vendor to do the network connectivity of those stations. So ours was considered low cost. Our utility didn't really specify or indicate what the cost of the infrastructure was, but our facilities department estimated that it was about a $750,000 expense that the district was able to, or cost that the district was able to save, because here at this yard, they also had to upgrade the power poles as well. Okay, there are rebates available. So through NUVVE, we were able to apply for rebates once the charging stations were installed. And they also do assist with fleet management. We had to provide vehicle acquisition to our utility. So you have to plan in advance, anywhere from 3 to 5 years down the road. Sometimes utilities could require up to 10 years down the road to be able to provide that vehicle acquisition and know exactly how you plan on replacing vehicles, so they feel confident in building out your infrastructure. We did have some hurdles with infrastructure at the time. We received the buses and still had probably about 8 months delay of our infrastructure being completed. So COVID kind of played a role for us in that, being delayed in that process. So planning in advance, they estimate 12 to 18 months in advance. And I would say that that is solid because we started talking to the utilities about a year beforehand, and it took about 18 months to complete. And that was even with COVID. Next slide. Training. So on these buses, they're totally different than not totally different, but proficiencies are taking about maybe double the amount of time to be able to teach the drivers how to operate the vehicles efficiently. The charging, or refueling, as some still refer to it, but charging of these units. If you have CNG in your fleet, it's pretty similar. Our process here is that whenever the bus is parked in its stall, just plug it in. We don't really inform the drivers what our peak hours are and when the buses are going to actually charge. We want them to just get in the habit of plugging the buses in. But we also have to know that when we have downtime, how do we properly secure the buses so that way they're not draining battery life, and if plugged in or if not plugged in. So it's definitely something that you're going to need to work with your training department. There's resources out there where the vendor can come in and do training with your maintenance department, as well as your drivers or your training staff, and working directly with your company where you get the charging stations from. For instance, NUVVE has been able to help us with the charging software and making sure that we are scheduled on certain hours for charging. There was a video in here. I'm not sure if we're able to play it. But Bluebird had come out when we first got the buses about 3 years ago and did a video for us. And it was in the slide before this, if it's possible.
No video showing up for me.
No, perhaps I can share my screen and see if it's possible to show it. It's just a 4-minute video, but it really does provide a great perspective from our training department, driver instructors, and really to get a feel of what the buses are all about and how great they're working for us. So give me 1 second here.
Hi, I'm Richard Avila. I'm a driver instructor here at Orange Unified School District. I've been a driver for Orange Unified School District for 16 years now. 16 years. Behavioral trainer, I'm sorry. About 11 years ago, and I've been a driver instructor for 7 years now. Well, it was a really good opportunity at the time. It was a good job, and it still is a good job. And I really come to love to driving these vehicles. I love driving these big buses. I love working with the people around me. I love driving kids. I have way too many kids, my own. So I love kids. You know, I can't help it. I love kids. But it's a great job. I get to work with kids, and I get to work with a lot of nice people too. Driving electric buses versus driving regular gas-powered or diesel-powered buses. The thing that caught me by surprise was how smoothly they drive. To be honest, when I was told I'm going to be driving an electric bus, I thought, well, electric bus, it's probably not going to be that fast. The battery's probably not going to last that long. There's going to be some kind of compromises, right? We want clean air, but there's got to be some kind of compromise. I was thinking it's going to be how the bus drives, okay? But I was really surprised when I drove this bus, how quickly it responds, how smooth the ride was, and how quiet it was. That's the thing that got me. It's such a nice atmosphere. And inside, the seats are blue. Well, all the other buses around here, they're either gray or different shades of brown. These have the blue seats in there. You get in there, the mood is so nice. I just love driving them. I love driving big vehicles, period. They're a lot of fun to drive. It's a lot like playing a video game. Well, the electric buses, they don't go as far in the charge as say a diesel bus with a full tank, okay? But the range is decent, okay? And it's plenty of range, plenty enough charge to do 95% of the route here, okay? Very seldom will anybody drive a route here that's more than 100 miles. Usually a bunch of the buses here, 5 or 6 miles, some maybe 20 or 30 miles. So although you don't get the same range with a diesel powered, gas powered bus, you get the range is fine. You get plenty of drivability in these buses. That was a big surprise to me. That was a surprise to me, okay? Like I said, I mentioned before, I expected the bus a little bit more sluggish, maybe going up hills, not a whole lot of power, might have to do some downshifting. But I was really surprised at how quickly this thing moves. You get on the throttle, it starts and it takes off. It's quick, and the acceleration is comparable to any of these other buses here, but it's a lot quieter. You don't have to hear all that noise. You don't have to suck up all those things. Yeah, the ride is, the bus is quick. It's got power, and it's a really smooth ride. That's what I like. Really smooth. That impressed me a lot. Yes, I do. First of all, for my emotional well-being, quiet buses are nice and calming. Okay, and I don't know if this is true or not, but I imagine a quieter bus is probably going to mean quieter students. They can relax too.
I guess that concludes our video. Anything else you wanted to add, Christina?
That is it. Thank you.
Okay, well, great presentations, and I see there are quite a few questions. And the way we're going to handle those is we are going to answer questions from the chat. We're not going to open up. There's no open mic here. And I'm going to have David go through those questions and ask those to our panel. So take it away, David.
Thank you, Barry. First question is for Rachel. Could you say more about the bidirectional and/or virtual power plant microgrid abilities?
Sure. I think this can go a lot of different ways. So I'll start talking, and then Beverly, if I'm not answering your question, just send another message, please. Okay, so bidirectional ability at NUVVE, we're focusing largely on V2G or vehicle to grid. You may have also seen V2X or vehicle to everything around. I have a colleague who says V2W, vehicle to whatever, because at some point it does feel that way, like vehicle to building, vehicle to vehicle, vehicle to load. So V2X, bidirectional capability, you can do more than just send energy to the grid. Maybe you want to be able to power up another vehicle if it's completely run out of battery. Maybe you want to be able to power a school building, or even a home that wouldn't be for a school bus, but some kind of building in case there is some kind of outage there. Maybe you want to be able to power other devices that are not, locked into the grid already. Like, I don't really know what you do with the school bus, power 100 laptops. So bidirectional capability can cover all of these different things. That said, most companies, including NUVVE, are focusing on more specific avenues. Like at NUVVE, we're largely vehicle to grid. As I said, we're also exploring more of the vehicle to building options, because we have seen that a lot of school districts are very interested in having that resiliency option, especially in areas that have been impacted by wildfires or could potentially be impacted by wildfires in the future. As far as microgrid capabilities, so microgrids, they're kind of exactly what they sound like a mini grid on whatever piece of land. It usually is connected to the larger grid. The special thing about microgrids is that they have the capability, if the entire power grid goes down, they sort of island themselves, assuming that they have all the necessary permissions from the utility. And maybe there's solar there and they can keep on running that way. Solar is feeding the microgrid operations, school buses are charging, the school buses can then backfeed into the microgrid and power anything else that is within that. The VPP or virtual power plant aspect, if you have a lot of bidirectional capable vehicles, electric school buses and otherwise, that's just more power sources. It's like having stationary batteries everywhere, but on wheels. I'll stop there.
Great, thank you. Next question is for Albert and/or Christina. On average, how long does it take to charge an electric school bus to go 100 miles?
I can take that, Christina, if you like.
Sure.
Yeah, if you're using a level 2 charger, which our bus is capable of charging with, the highest power level 2 charger you can buy is a 19.2 kilowatt 80 amp charger. That'll take about 8 hours to fully charge our battery, which will go about 100 miles. If you opt to do it with a DC fast charger, our bus is capable of charging at a 60 kilowatt charge rate. So if you buy a charger that meets that specification, you can do it in about 2.5 to 3 hours.
Yeah, and I would echo that. Obviously, he knows it's his buses, but that's exactly our experience. We have level 2 AC chargers right now at the 19.2 kilowatt, and it's taking about 8 hours, as Albert said. And so on our second phase of infrastructure that we're working on right now with our utility, we're going to be incorporating some level 3 fast chargers into the mix, so that way we have the ability to charge in between the middle of the day, to be able to utilize some buses on afternoon routes that right now we're noticing we might not be able to, only because our internal policy is that a bus cannot leave the yard with like less than half of a charge.
Great, thank you. The next question's for you both again, and that is life expectancy. How does an electric school bus compare to a diesel school bus? Expressed either in time or in miles, whichever is most appropriate.
Well, life is kind of, depends on the bus and the market, right? In California, they drive buses a really long time, as Christina probably knows. Some buses are well over 20 years old. But if you go up to the Northeast, Massachusetts, and some of those markets where they have all the corrosive materials they use on the roads in the wintertime, buses typically don't last that long. They might replace them in 10 to 12 years. But we haven't had any buses in the market that long. So I guess it's a bit of a wait and see. But we do expect the batteries under normal conditions, normal duty cycles that most school districts run, to probably last 12 to 15 years for the batteries. Now, they probably won't have the same range they did when they were new. The batteries will degrade over time. And so instead of getting maybe 100 miles on a full charge, it might be more closer to like 80 miles on a full charge. Doesn't mean you necessarily couldn't use it on a shorter route, but it would have some limitations over time.
Great, thank you. Next question has to do with the NACS trend, right? So Tesla superchargers and their standard connection. So the question's for Rachel and Albert. Any plans to adopt NACS? And if so, when?
Yeah, Rich, I don't know if you guys are on your charging side. For us, it's a little different because, school districts don't do public charging. They all come back to their same depot each night. And so there really is no reason for us to charge or change to a different charging plug at any point in the near future. We're going to stick with the CCS1 because, again, they aren't doing public charging. Don't have to worry about going up to a Tesla charger and charging their bus. So no plans at the moment. That could change at some point, though.
And if I can add to, over time, I would imagine that school districts will probably start collaborating together. We here in Orange County, we have something called an OC mutual agreement where we can assist one another at any time in the event of emergencies and things of that nature, with routes specifically. So I know school districts across Southern California are already talking about the need to be able to provide support for one another in the event of charging. If we're on long field trips and eventually we're converting our fleets over to 100% electric. I know some air quality districts can still purchase diesel, so they're rushing to purchase those diesels before CARB changes their regulations and emission standards. But in my air quality district, we can't. We're alternative fuels only. So districts are already starting to collaborate with each other on developing mutual agreements to be able to assist one another with charging in the event that charging is needed if we're in their areas. But I'm sure that if everyone's using, same types of buses, same types of charging stations, that shouldn't be an issue. Although I know that some manufacturers only allow for, certain plugs versus other manufacturers. So.
And real quick on NUVVE side for the NACS standard. So we know there's been a ton of talk about it, so we're certainly open to it. We are looking into it. That said, V2G is so specific to the manufacturer. If Albert tells me tomorrow that Bluebird is switching everything to NACS standard, then we'll figure it out on our end really quickly. But we're going to kind of follow our partners on that.
Great, thank you. Quick funding question, I think, for you, Christina. How do school districts pay for these buses? Financing available to align with capital costs and savings in fuel and maintenance?
So for my district specifically, we've really been utilizing the grant funding that's available to us. So the first 7 electric vehicles that we got were funded through Volkswagen Mitigation Trust Fund. And aside from just sales tax on the vehicle, we didn't have to pay for any other cost. So for those 7 buses, it came out to be about $200,000 for 7 electric vehicles. That was the equivalent of sales tax. And we've kind of been doing the same moving forward. So we have another 2 buses that we stacked together with AQMD and with HVIP funding. So for those 2 buses, again, the equivalent of only sales tax was about $30,000 total. And then the last group of buses we actually did with HVIP funding, which is equivalent to approximately half off of a bus. And we use district reserves to fund the rest. We did that specifically just because we didn't want to lose the HVIP vouchers that we had available to us, and we needed to acquire more buses to suffice with the vehicle acquisition plan provided to our utility for the infrastructure build out. So that is how our district funded it, but definitely utilizing grant funding that's available.
And I
Great,
just add to that there are some funding or financing companies that we partner with that can do financing, basically instead of doing like a capital expenditure to buy the buses, they can turn it into an operational lease and lease the buses over an extended period of time with the infrastructure, like 12 to 15 years, even as long as that, to bring those costs down on a monthly basis to make it very affordable. If you can't cover all of it with grant funding, or just a portion of it with grant funding.
Right. And then just I guess to add one more piece as well. You know, our district didn't have a vehicle replacement program because funding was not really available at one point in time until it became available. But now in California, there's the home to school transportation funding grant that's available to school districts. And so we are utilizing that money as well as grant funding to make sure that we keep up on our vehicle replacements.
Great, thank you. Next question, I think, is going to be largely for you, Albert. It's a long question having to do with standards, but think of it this way: you're trying to, move in to the garages that had the diesel buses. A lot of those had interchangeable parts, or with a little MacGyvering, if anybody remembers that old sitcom or old series. Could get away with being able to make parts work across different vendors. Any standardization that you would point out, anything that you're doing to cooperate with other vendors that might be competitors and on some days to help alleviate some of those concerns for a purchaser of perhaps multi-vendor buses?
Yeah, I'd say there really hasn't been any collaboration, to be perfectly honest. A lot of that has to do also just the supply chain challenges in this particular market with battery and other components, where there probably isn't enough battery capacity for these size vehicles to meet the demand with just one, for multiple manufacturers. So everyone is using, for the most part, different battery manufacturers. Some of us are using the same motor supplier, Dana. In many cases, the other OEMs use them as well, because it's been a very good product. And so you have some of that commonality, but for the most part, no, not at the moment, and nothing that I would expect in the near term either.
How about V2G standards?
Rachel, you want to take that one?
Sure. So that's why there is such a big push for specific V2G standards, that we don't have these vertically integrated pipelines where you're locked into like one manufacturer, one charging station, and you're not able to branch out at all beyond that. Probably not the time to get into the specific standards, but if anyone is interested, please shoot me an email, rzook@nuvve.com, and I can list out those specific standards if you are putting out like an RFP and you want to make sure that you are getting equipment, getting buses that do have those capabilities.
Great, thank you. Okay, so this final question, how does a school district determine TOC, total ownership cost, I think, and the potential benefits of V2G if their utility does not have standard demand charge rates?
I'll answer the total cost of ownership portion. I don't have too much experience with the benefits of V2G with the utility specifically, so maybe Rachel or someone else would want to chime in on that. Total cost of ownership, we kind of, a lot of it you're going into it a little blind, since it's newer buses in the industry, but we took into account the fact that we knew it was going to reduce the fuel cost and the maintenance cost. We looked at being told that the batteries would have to be replaced every 7 to 10 years and just estimated what the cost would be. which still altogether was significantly less than what you would spend on, a diesel bus equivalent in size on similar routes. So right now we are determining, after about a year of operating these vehicles, that the cost savings in fuel alone is quite significant, of about $1.30 per mile.
And I can jump in on the V2G point. So at NUVVE, my focus is on utilities across the US and a couple other countries. The US has over 3,000 different utilities. So I do understand that, demand charge rates and tariffs, everything is going to vary. So for ones that have non-standard, maybe they're all non-standard, we look at those on a case-by-case basis. So if it's a utility that doesn't have anything at all set up, then I usually contact them and see if we can work something out. There's a lot of flexibility with municipal utilities and co-ops. And if it's a utility that won't budge, there are actually statewide energy markets, and there are mechanisms that we can use to bid in your aggregation, the energy that you have available, into those markets. So there are always possibilities. It's absolutely a case-by-case basis. If you want me to dig into your utility specifically, just message me. I'm happy to do it.
Great. Well, one last comment, maybe more than a question, came through that I'd like to repeat. Maybe it's a good way to kind of wrap up that. Even if you replace the full battery pack every 7 to 10 years, an electric bus appears to be cheaper to own than a diesel. So if anyone wants to add any icing to that cake.
For us, the reason it would be cheaper is because our buses were practically fully funded. So there was no cost to get the bus, essentially, aside from sales tax. So yes, with that assumption, on our end, it would be cheaper as right now, even replacing every 7 to 10 years, based on what we're being told the cost of the batteries would be, although those numbers have not really been publicized or figured out yet.
Yeah, that's very true. I mean, without any kind of upfront subsidies to offset the additional cost of the bus, there really isn't a positive total cost of ownership over the life of an electric bus today. Even with the big fuel savings and maintenance savings, you do need some assistance up front to help offset some of that cost before you see a positive return on investment over the life of a bus.
Yeah, I believe that wraps up our Q&A. Floor is back to you, Barry.
Yeah, there was one other question that came up there in regards to real world range. I know when I drive my Tesla, which is supposed to get over 300 miles on a full charge, and I take it out on a road trip, and I'm lucky if I get 200 miles. How about these buses? They're rated at 100 or 130 miles per full charge, but in reality, you're really not going from 100% down to 0%. What is the real world range on those buses? Christina, maybe you have the experience with that?
Yeah, so on our routes, some buses are getting about 85 to 95 miles to a full charge, and some are getting about 100 to 105 miles to a full charge. So we've noticed the older generation of buses are the ones that are getting about 85 to 95 versus the newer set of buses that we received, but pretty accurate according to what they're advertising.
Well, that's great. That's
and then just
better
like
better than my Tesla.
Yeah, just like a diesel too, it is all dependent on the driver, the way that the driver is driving the vehicle, how aggressive they're being. So, the routes that you're placing them on, you need to consider the hills as well. So we have a lot of routes that are in the hills. Those are the ones that are averaging less miles per full charge.
And the great thing is these buses do have regenerative braking. And that's why the drivers make such a big difference, because using less of your surface brake and using regenerative braking to slow down. I mean, the regenerative braking is fairly aggressive. It can take the bus almost to a complete stop if you allow it to without even touching your brake. And the nice thing about that is it puts a lot of energy back in the batteries. also prolongs the life of your brakes as well. So customers are reporting 3 to 4 times the life of the brakes on their EV buses compared to their diesels when you drive it and use the regenerative braking properly.
Okay, thank you very much to our presenters, and I'm going to turn this over to John to close this up.
Well, great. I just want to thank you all for a great presentation. Really covered the topic, very informative, and really appreciated. And I think that's it. Let's close it up. Thank you very much. I'm going to stop the recording, and really great appreciation for the presenters. Wonderful, wonderful job.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.